Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Two guys and a girl. Good morning, Glenn.
That's right.
Yeah, good morning, Lynda.
Good morning.
Hey, Lynda, good morning.
Hi.
Two guys
Welcome,
and a
welcome.
girl.
Welcome to the coffee shop.
That's right.
Glad to be here. I am Glee to a double N and Smiling Mike. Happy, joyous, and free to be with you guys and in this program and under the care of our Creator.
It's good stuff, man. It's good
Sure
stuff.
is.
So,
glad to be here.
So,
and what a beautiful cafe. The Audio Hive Cafe.
I
and Brian.
know.
This is beautiful.
fresh coffee. We got the people. We got the high production value. And so it's professional and personal all in a blended cup.
And then, I've been listening to this podcast for a while. I've listened to all of them, and you get this idea in your head of what it looks like, and it's just even better. And I love that when,
Yeah.
Wait. So I am confused. So I thought all of our listeners were Mike's mom. So we actually have one other, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah, she's our number one downloader.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's great. So listen, invited you here to have coffee. I got to do a little setup, though, of my friend Lynda to you, Glenn. I came into the program. I was such a train wreck, as we've talked about. I mean, I literally was shaking in my boots. I was having a hard time putting my left foot in front of my right foot. And I was so blessed because there was a meeting center only a few miles from my house that was recommended me that I go. And because I've got this funny thing called a mortgage, which, has to be paid every month. I've got this funny thing called a job, which I need to go to every day. But they had these, so that was my, that was my excuse. But it turns out that they got these meetings at like 7 a.m. So my third day I come into a meeting and they're gonna talk, they're gonna read out of the book called The 12 and 12. I have no idea. And there's this lady sitting at the front of the table and I'm thinking, okay, this is school. I'm ready to go. And she opened her mouth, and I felt loved immediately. And in the program, guys usually stick with guys and gals, but there's such a crossover because the women in this program have helped me so much. Maybe it's the softer side of me, Glenn. I don't know. But anyway, look, Lynda's been an awful lot to me in my journey to recovery. She continues to teach me and guide me through her experience, strength, and hope. And I'm just so glad she's joining us for coffee this morning. You're the lover.
Totally. Amen. It's funny. My wife says, she goes, people are probably going to be tired of hearing guys, right? You should get some women in there because people are already tired of hearing you guys. So, Lynda, great to have you in here.
I love your wife. I never even met her, and I love her already.
You gotta love her if he puts up with him.
I'm so glad you guys invited me, and thank you for that, Mike. It's funny you said the softer side, and there's nothing soft about me.
Right. Well, let's start digging in. So, okay. Lynda, here's what we typically do. For our sessions, they usually last 18 minutes. Usually not, but
right.
we're trying to last 18 minutes. But we take that 18 minutes and we break it down into 3 sections, right? Experience, strength, and hope, right? Experience, what we went through, what things were like, what we did. I like to say what we did in the sober gym, right? What tools did we learn? What tools do we use? And then hope, what happened? How have things changed? And what are we looking for tomorrow? We're looking for later on today, right? Because we did all those other things. So if you could, share your story just kind of, with that, we don't really do drunkalogs that much. But love having you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for inviting me. I remember the first day when I saw you walk in, and you too, Glenn. The first time I seen you walk in,
I remember
over
that.
in Aurelio's.
I remember that.
Boy, man, you were torn down, man. It was like he's going the
which
revolving.
One of the 200 times?
Well, right, the revolving door.
That was me.
And it's funny though because I got to be honest with you,
funny.
and it's an honest program. I was pissed, man. You pissed me off, Glenn. Because you come in and you're just so beaten down, and then you're talking about what you got to do and what we got to do, and I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? He's like, just shut up and listen. But I couldn't say it. But I love, and so your name has come up a few times, and I see you at meetings all the time, and I was like, yeah, Glenn, and they're like, man, I love what Glenn has to say. I love his message, and it was like I had to change my thought process, about who you are, and I really never know you. I never really talked to you or anything. Just listen to your experience, strength, and hope in the meetings, and then changing that thought around to a new perspective is so awesome, So, and then Mike, go ahead.
That's really interesting because I relate to that. I mean, I'm very aware of how I acted back then, and back then I spoke it, and I didn't live it.
Right. You were
Now
talking the
I'm trying
talk
to live
and not
it.
walking the walk, and it was pissing
and
me
that's
off.
how I was
man.
getting the results.
And it was like, and I couldn't say anything. We don't like crosstalk, I was just like,
Right.
and I was living in my own resentment of you, and it's like ridiculous.
But you know what? You didn't pull me aside, but many people did. In fact,
Well, it was up to the men, It's not up to me. And the thing is what pisses me off about someone else is usually what I see in myself. And I'm so full of ego, it's ridiculous. I haven't been able to sleep for the last 3 nights thinking about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to impress everybody, And it's like, and I freaking couldn't sleep, And it was so funny because this morning, every morning, I text with my sponsor, and I told her another night, we were at a meeting yesterday afternoon together, the ladies' meeting. And anyway, and I'm thinking, I know it's all ego, and I was just like, I couldn't sleep, and my mind hits the pillow and it goes in all these directions, and I'm just going, be still and know that I am God, trying to meditate it out. And she goes right into, ego. And I mean, she had it down. I'm like, you nailed it on the head. She's like, 7-step prayer. And I'm like, oh my God, I love her so much. Thank you, Lynn. You're so wonderful. Anyway,
Tell me your story.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I came from generations and generations of drug-addicted alcoholics. The Native American, my dad's side, and my grandpa was an abusive alcoholic, and my dad was the oldest of 13, poor, living in rural Indiana. And my mom's side, also my grandpa on that side, was a rum runner back, so it was. I was the oldest of 3 children. I had 2 younger brothers, and when I remember the first thing I remember was when I was 2, when I had my tonsils out, and that's the thing is I do have a pretty good memory, even the dream I had when I was 2 years old, I can remember. But I remember my parents fighting a lot and coffee mugs thrown across the room, and then one night, my mom decided to go out. My dad liked to keep her barefoot and pregnant, and she had to stay home with the kids, and he got to go out drinking and blah, blah, blah. And she decided to take a night out for herself with the ladies. And so she left us, me and my 2 younger brothers. I was 4 years old, and she left me and my 2 younger brothers with the pastor and his wife next door. And, I remember sitting with her, and it was just such a neat feeling because she was reading to us. She put an apple pie in the oven that we were going to have for breakfast. And so I went to bed. I just felt I remember feeling very happy and content. And in the middle of the night, my dad and his mom and his brothers came and they took us. He was pissed. My mom had left us with someone else. And I remember my grandma I was just, where's Mom? I want Mom to, don't worry, here's some chocolate donuts. And I was like, I don't want donuts. I want apple pie. And so he he brought us out to rural Indiana, and he was hiding us from my mom. He would bring us to different families, he would leave us for a couple of days and he'd be gone for a couple of weeks. I remember the families having children, had us 3 kids with them along with their kids, and the parents arguing about when is Aaron going to get these kids, and just not feeling wanted. I remember the mom holding one of her kids and comforting, and I thought, I want to be held and comforted, and it was like, and I thought if that was me and I was that mom, I would be holding and comforting these kids, and I always had the idea what I think you should do. So, I'm not going to go into a lot of that, but I'll tell you what, my dad ended up marrying a stripper so he could get a mom for us, and it was when I was in 1st grade. And so we had been moved around a bunch from 4 until I was 6. And then we settled into a house. And my stepmother was... Okay, I can go into stories about that. Anyway, we were in a terrible car accident when I was in 1st grade. No, first thing that happened in first grade was I told my teacher I was taken from my mom. And she called the house and talked to my stepmother. And my stepmother said, oh, she's crazy. Don't listen to her. And then we were in a terrible car accident in third grade. And at the hospital, the police were there. And I told the police that I was taken from my mom. Could you bring me to my mom? And they brought me to my stepmother, who was laying on the table with crushed up from the accident. She's like, oh, don't listen to her. She's crazy. And I was miserable. I had, until I was 10 years old, I had no love. I was, we were pretty much neglected. There was no dentist. There was no doctor. There was no love. There was no hugs. Dad wasn't around much because he was drinking. And my grandma, my dad's mom, said, I remember one Christmas when I was 10, she said, what's wrong? And I was like, I want to be with my mom. You know, like, and she said, well, why don't you pray? I'm like, pray? What's that? You know, and she's like, well, you know, there's God. And she was trying to tell me about God, and that don't pray like you know, you could pray to him of the things you want, but don't do it like Santa Claus. You know, you got to pray from your heart. And I remember going to my room that night and thinking, wow, you know, I can tell you I was taken from my mom, and you're not going to tell me I'm crazy. And I remember looking up and just saying, if you're there, prove it. I was 10 years old. I was like, prove it, bring me to my mom. And within a couple of days, I had a vision of being this angel-like and picking me up, coming through the window, picking me up, taking me out the window, and carrying me across the sky. And I'm looking down. I got this angel. I felt very comfortable. And I could see all these street lights, like highway street lights blowing, all these cars. And it didn't end where he brought me to my mom, but I knew he was bringing me there, this angel. And 2 weeks later, my mom was at the door of the house. And my brothers and I were standing there, and they didn't remind, I knew who it was right away, but my brothers, my youngest was just a baby when my dad, and the other one was only, he was a couple of years younger than me. So they were like, who's that? I'm like, that's our mom. You know, and they told us to go upstairs, and my dad and my mom and my stepmother were sitting at the kitchen table, and they asked us to come down. They stood us in front of them, and Dad goes, okay, who do you want to live with, you know? And
10-year-old.
My dad, my 10, and my brother,
Yeah, right.
who was, 8, and then the other one was 6, and it was like, seriously, there's no doubt, mom. And we all said mom. And my brothers didn't even know her, But there's that thing. There's that connection. And plus, we were not in a good, healthy, environment. And come to find out years later, my dad was so offended and so taken back, because his narcissistic alcoholism had taken over. And he had been providing for us for all those years. And he didn't even know this overweight, not beautiful as far as he was concerned woman. Why would they want to be with her? So, and I remember driving up to the inner city Chicago on the highway up Dan Ryan Expressway and seeing the lights in the cars and going, wow.
So your vision.
And so that was my first catapult into the fourth dimension, they call it. So there was something, wow, and I forgot about that prayer, to God, until, so I went from, rural Indiana to inner city Chicago. And oh
Big
my
step.
God, it was terrible. I hated it, except that I was with my mom, And she was raising the three of us on her own, working 2 jobs. So I was taking over. I was the oldest and made sure everything was done. And she had her friend named Sue. And see, my mom, I found out, liked to smoke pot, And she had her good best friend, Sue. And they were partying. And Sue had a little brother named Michael. And when I was 10 years old, I met Michael. And we hit it off right away. In fact, when I met him, they lived up in the north side, but he came down for one summer, and we were dressed the same. We had the same short haircut. We had the love beads. We had the jeans and then the peace T-shirt with
Little
the
hippies.
American flag. Oh, yeah, little baby
Little
hippies.
hippies.
Yeah, we were baby. My mom was a hippie. And I fell in love with him right away, even at 10 years old. But it wasn't, it was just, it was a connection. And then kept in touch, and then when I was 13, the summer between 7th and 8th grade, I went up to visit him up in Wonder Lake. And I never felt like I belonged. I was one of those that had moved around. I didn't know enough, and I wasn't pretty enough. I had a stepsister at the time when I was with my stepmother, and she was everything, and I was nothing. And so anyway, So I went up to visit Michael for a week, and one day I had my first hit off a cigarette, first hit off a joint, first drink, and first kiss all in one day with Michael. And I was off to the races.
Wow.
You know, and I came.
Overachiever.
I know, right? It was like, oh my
The
God.
quadfecta.
It was, and it was awesome because I came back, to the city in 8th grade, and all of a sudden I had all these friends, but I was really afraid of the drink. Because my dad, so I'll be a drug addict like my mom. I'll smoke pot, but I am not going to be an alcoholic like my dad. So I was very careful. But my mom was a very free spirit and hated the city and started praying to God to get out of the city. And we did when I was between my freshman and sophomore year. And we moved in to the south suburbs here in Richton Park, and I went to the all-American high school. It was awesome, and carpeting, floor to floor carpeting, air conditioning. It was totally different from the inner city, and they had a smoking lounge.
Oh,
if you had permission from your parents, you could smoke. And it was an outside thing. It was awesome. So of course my mom gave me permission. I mean, she was having kegger parties for me starting at 15 years old, and I was real careful not to drink. But boy, oh boy, the pot ran wild, and then I was doing other things too, I was taking hits of acid and trying different drugs and things like that. And by the time I when I was 17, I remember said, I can't continue this way. I don't want to continue to be a drug addict, and I remember praying to God. It's like, I knew these things I wanted to do before I was 18, and that was, 1, get closer to God, and 2, quit with the drugs and alcohol, quit smoking, exercise better, blah blah blah. But anyway, those are the things, and so I did. I started. I went to beauty school while I was in high school. Went half a day, half day. I graduated. I was getting high, smoking Thai weed in the morning, whatever, and still I was getting honor roll my senior year in high school. I was still being able to maintain, and I started working at the beauty shop, and because I got my license when I was 17, working at the beauty shop. Well, I learned how to do cocaine from my boss, at the beauty shop, and smoking pot, and
But there were some great haircuts there. Huh?
Oh man, we were having a blast. Well, not during work, of course, but after, and then that was my, that was my group. Those are my people. We went out, and woo, that was fun. Yeah. And anyway, then I met my husband. I met him. At a friend's house, and we were doing coke and partying up and everything, and I thought right away when I looked at him, wow, he's good looking, 6'4", lean, and oh my gosh. And he came over and whispered in my ear, do you know where I can get some of those drugs? And the hair on the back of my neck and the goose pimples, and I'm like, oh my God, this is my guy, and so the third time meeting him, that was it. We went on a date, and we sat for hours and hours talking about what we expected in a relationship, and then we were not going to continue with the drugs. That was just a temporary thing, and he was everything I wanted, and I was everything he wanted, and I had to look it up in Lynda Goodman's love signs about the Gemini woman and the Libra man, and that night we were doing acid, and we were having so much fun. And it said in Lynda Goodman's love sign that they were the 2 most compatible of the, and they're most likely to meet on a trip. And I was like, oh yeah, we were tripping. I was
Different
like,
definition of a trip.
Oh well, no, that was the answer. That was God's sign right there. He's the one for me, So, and we had a great relationship. But trying to quit, we were doing the cocaine, and then I got pregnant with my first one after we were married for a year and a half, and I knew I couldn't, and I stopped right away, and I prayed, and I really took on God then. I really accepted him in my life, and for the next 10 years I had my 3 kids, and I wasn't using it all, and then we took a trip to Jamaica after my son, and everything changed again, and we went to Jamaica a lot then because we could smoke the ganj and drink, and then we started doing the cocaine again. And one time we went for 2 weeks, and I did so much coke that I blew a hole through my nose. And through the, and I couldn't do it anymore. And then my mom died, and I wasn't doing cocaine anymore, but I remember sitting out by the fire pit in my house. We had a beautiful 2 acres, wooded property. We had our house paid off in 15 years. Everything was going great, I was sitting by the fire pit playing my guitar, and a song came up. This is a year after my mom died, and I was playing a Neil Young song. I just started breaking into tears because it was her favorite. And the next door neighbor came over. He saw me crying. You okay? I'm like, yeah. Just, my mom, And he's like, well, I got a little Coke. You want to do a little Coke? Well, no. I don't do that anymore. I blew a hole through my nose. He's like, no, I'll show you. We'll cook it up and smoke it. Check this out. And I had to hit off that pipe, and that was the answer. That did it. I was so, oh my God, it felt so good. Everything was gone. And, my husband got some Coke, and I said, I learned how to cook it up and smoke it. And he goes, that ruins families. I heard we can't do that. I'm like, And so, we got addicted to crack cocaine. And we were cooking it up. We were getting the good stuff, we had this woman, this little black woman, and she had the best stuff. And we cook it up, and then I started becoming not present. My middle daughter said, you became not present. I was hiding out in the camper, smoking it. I was going and getting it from her and not telling my husband. And we were getting it together. And when the winter came, I went down in the basement, in a little corner room doing it. And it took over my life, and we had a lot of money, at the time. So that's kind of dangerous when you're a drug addict. And then I went to her to get
It's a quick way to go from a lot of money to a little bit of money.
No,
right?
you know what, though? We were doing fine. We were making a lot of money. We had a trucking business, know, and I gave up my career to be home with the kids because I knew I was from generations of women that had been separated from their mothers before they were 18. My great-grandmother was her mom died when she was born. I'm not going to go, but all of us, my mom, my grandmother, and me, and I was determined to break that. And so I went to get some from and she said, that's it. I was so skinny and so withdrawn, and she had seen our family, and she goes, that's it. No more for you. I'm done. I'm not selling to you anymore. And she's like, you're coming and getting it and not telling, and say not to tell him, and he's coming and getting it and telling him not to tell you, and you're both, and you look like crap, and you're going to ruin your family. You're done. And I'm like, what Coke dealer tells somebody they can't? And
Boy, they have morals and integrity.
No kidding.
Right?
No,
What kind of dealer is that?
Right, Clint? And she goes, you need 90 and 90. I'm like, what's that? And she's like, look it up. She was pissed. So I had to look it up, and I'm like, meeting. So, I brought it up to my husband, and he was like, nah, we can do it. Well, we've been trying to do that for years to stop. And all we had to do was look at each other across the room, Yep. And so it finally, I'll tell you, I looked it up, on Google for rehab, and I needed to get away. And how it says, I feel lucky. I put in everything that I had, and I don't believe in luck. I believe in blessings. And I felt, okay, I feel blessed with it. And it came up able to change in California, and I was looking for something very humble. I don't want to go to a resort. I want to go someplace, that doesn't cost a lot. And when I was looking over this and looking over the staff and everything, I felt like I knew them my whole lives. The counselor, main guy, was a Native American. You could tell he was, and it was just, I just felt like I really connected. And I begged my husband for 2 more years to let me go, and he wouldn't. And, we could do this. And finally, one night, I just packed up my stuff. He was at work. I packed up my stuff and started driving west on I-80. I was just going to go. And I called my brother, and he's like, Lynda, you can't just do it that way. You need to, say goodbye to your family and everything. So I stopped, and I went and found some more Coke and cooked it up at a hotel room and was doing it myself. And I went back home, and he was still sleeping. He didn't even read the note, didn't even know I was gone. And I told him I have to go, so he let me go. And it was the best experience of my life. And so, he was going to stay home and do it on his own and take care of things. Mm-hmm. And I was going to go. And I was just going to do 30 days. And within the first few weeks after talking, I could tell he was just still smoking it, And the people at the rehab were saying, you can't go back. You can't go back home. I'm like, what do you mean you can't go back? I got my 3 kids, So I stayed for 59 days, and the next day my daughter was graduating high school, my oldest one. I wanted to be there for her. So I had everything planned, all the meetings. I had my first 12-step meeting for alcoholics in California, and I really didn't feel like I belonged because I was a drug addict. I wasn't an alcoholic. But boy, when I sat and listened to your stories, I was like, I can relate to everything. And you guys are laughing about, all the crazy insanity. And I was like, wow, I feel like I belong in there. And I would say, I'm Lynda, I'm an addict. And they would go, oh, you can't say that. This is, there's a tradition here that you have to, have a desire to stop drinking. I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I don't want to drink either, So I kind of belong, but not really. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. And came home and started going to meetings, got a sponsor, blah, 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 and I got a resentment against my sponsor and stopped going to meetings, started talking to her. I ended up staying in bed. 6 months later, I heard my bad. I was in bed for 3 months because I didn't want to get out of bed because I was afraid I was going to use. And I heard my husband in the bathroom using, and I was like, forget it. Got up and went in there and did it. And like, no, we can't just snort it. I need to cook it up. And oh my gosh, I'm right back to where I was. And I knew I didn't want to go back. So that was when I made the decision. And I thought, I'll just have a little drink at night, take the edge off. Boy, did that progress quickly. And it didn't take long for me to realize, when I was coming home from work, I'm not going to get that. I'm not going to get the vodka. I'm not going to do it. And then the steering wheel automatically pulled into the liquor store. I'm like, I'm a freaking alcoholic. Everything you guys taught me in AA, I learned about it. Mm-hmm. I did it. I was hiding the bottles, going to different liquor stores, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't get my ass up to get to a meeting because had been going to the out in Chicago Heights, and the 10 a.m. meetings were mine. My husband was doing everything he could in his power to keep me from going. He hated AA, hated the idea that you're powerless. How can you be powerless? And that the family after the family time, and rehab was, they were like, you're an enabler. And he's like, an enabler, it's her decision, And so he was very angry, and then, Michael, he found me on Facebook in March of 2012. And I was like, oh, my God, that guy, there's no way. Because I had seen him when I was 18. He was such an alcoholic, drug addict mess. I had nothing to do with that guy. And he gave me his number. And he's like, I thought, I don't have nothing to do, And in April, I was drunk one night. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to call him, And what the heck? And so I called him, blah, 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 giving him my drunk log on. And he goes, oh, my God. I'm like, what? He's like, I've been in AA for 5 years. It saved my life. Get your ass to a meeting. Oh, so I did the next morning, and I got a sponsor and all this. Well, my husband was having a really hard time. He's trying to do it on his own, and he would go a few days, but he was miserable laying back there, laying with his hand over his head, and just miserable. I'm like, have a drink, smoke a joint, just don't be like that, and then he would binge, and then he started hurting me physically. And I realized that, I learned from you guys in the room that there's only one thing you have to change, and that's everything. And I knew I had to leave if I wanted to stay sober. So I moved up with my sister-in-law up in McHenry. She invited me to move up there. And I started working a program up there, going to meetings all the time. And a Saturday morning, now Michael was, I called him my angel, because he had got me back into back into AA. And he used to call me Pocahontas, And it was so weird because when I moved up there, I went to the Saturday morning big book study, and I walk in, and who do you think is chairing that meeting? I had no idea. Michael was chairing that meeting, and it was his 5-year anniversary. That day he was chairing the meeting. We're reading out of the big book, and it's called this. We were reading in the back of the personal stories in the back, and it was Listening to the Wind, which is it took an angel to introduce this Native American woman to AA and recovery. I started crying. I'm like, I'll catapult into the fourth dimension. Really too coincidental, And I'll tell you what, I was loving the program. Everything was on the pink cloud and everything. But to be honest with you, I was not working the principles. There's a set of principles that we have that our guides said. It's not just about not drinking, and it's about living a new life. And I was separated from my husband, and I was kind of crazy, 13-stepping out there. And there was a young gentleman that was interested in me as well, and we went to meet out to see the Bears play the Green Bay October 1st, 2012, at a bar. And I met him in the rooms, and I go in there, and he's sitting in the corner with a pitcher of beer with his grin on his face. And I was like, oh, Lord, I need a shot for this one, So I went up to the bar, and this is 6 months sober. I gave up everything to get sober. And here I am at a bar to meet a guy, and I'm like, shot of tequila, lime, salt, blom. Oh, I need another one. All 3. Got to have 3 at least. And then that third one, I looked up and I saw myself in the mirror. I was like, I hate you, bitch. That was it. And I slammed it down. I looked over, he had this grin. I turned around, I walked out. I thought, God, get me home safe. I never got a DUI. I never got in trouble. And the next day I told on myself, on my sponsor, and my home group. I dug myself in the program. And a gentleman came up to me in the rooms and he says, after I shared, and told him myself, and he goes, what if someone comes up to you and says, I got some bad news. Are you ready for it? And he looked me straight in the eye. I got some bad news. Are you ready for it? And I thought, oh my God, I can't drink over anything. It doesn't matter, or drug. And usually when I wanted to, it was because I was feeling really good. It was like, okay, I feel good. Let's feel even better, So I was really praying on that. My last drink was October 1st, 2012. And I was praying on that. I was really digging. I was staying in the middle of the herd, working my steps. And I'm in the middle of a meeting a couple days before Christmas. And my daughters are calling me. Now, my kids wanted nothing to do with me at this point, all 3 of them, because I abandoned the family. I didn't tell them anything about what was going on or why. I just knew I had to leave. I didn't want to tell them anything bad about their father. And my daughters are calling, what the heck is that about? And I went out, and I called my oldest daughter, and she goes, Mom, are you sitting down? And I was like, oh, and she goes, I got some bad news. Are you ready for it? And I just freaked out because I'm like, oh my, catapult to the 4th dimension. There it is. She said exactly those words that I have been praying on that gentleman said. I thought, oh God, help her. Instead of help me, I'm thinking, help her. Something's up. What happened? My youngest son, blah, blah, blah. And she said, Dad killed himself. My husband had taken his life. And through the grace of God and the fellowship of the program, I didn't have to drink over that. I went to the funeral, and it was like I was the one that put the gun to him, because all they heard was his side of the story of why I left. And they knew that I was the one that went to rehab, and that, And it was very difficult. My kids wanted nothing to do with me. My daughter looked at me like I was the devil, hated me. And I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and let them, and explain, and thank God for my sponsor telling me that, you know what, you can't. You got to let them go and give them to God and just work your program. Mm-hmm. And today, coming on 9 years, I have that relationship built up with all 3 of my kids.
That's awesome.
And I have 2 grandchildren.
Boy, that's some hope, huh?
Right. You know what? And
Wow.
There's so much that's even more about my sobriety. I just went into the, my grandpa died going through the windshield drunk driving. My brother died going through the windshield into the Kankakee River. He was only 14, my youngest brother. Other grandpa died from alcoholism and emphysema from smoking. Dad died from cancer from drinking and not taking care of himself. And my mom died from a drug overdose. Everybody in my family died from it.
And not Lynda.
Not Lynda, no. And when I thought about it, and I was in my sobriety, and I'm thinking, I just want to be with you guys. This is rough, man.
Sure.
And they were all around me. I could feel them all, and they're like, no, Lynda, you got something you got to do. Yeah. And I'm like, woo.
And you do have something you need to do. You share your story, that experience, but then as Glenn said, the hope that you have now, and I see the bounce in your step.
Oh, yeah.
I see your faith, your strong faith. I see your confidence, and I see you giving back to a community, saying, look, you can go through all kinds of tragedy and come on the other side of this.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about you.
Because there's all of those experiences are helping me to help somebody else, and that is my purpose in life.
Right.
I know what it is. And I can not only help them about drugs and alcohol, but there's codependency, there's grief, and hopefully now about smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, right.
I'm working on that one now.
Yes, Lynda, I love your story. I mean, I took a page of notes. And just to recap a couple, just amazing the impact that alcoholism has on families.
Right.
I'm reminded of a chapter in the Big Book that says there is a solution. And another thing, and I know I don't know all the details of what you do today. I know I've actually counted the things I do. There's 23 things I do to stay sober. I know you do a lot. Mm-hmm. Very active. And I wrote it down, you're in the middle of the herd.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
That's the place to be to stay sober. That just hit it for me. But I want to put you on the spot.
Okay. Goody. I love challenges.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
So You referenced a point in the bar in 2012 where you looked in the mirror and you said, "I hate you, bitch."
Yes.
That should probably be the title of this episode. I hate you, bitch.
Right.
Okay, so I think the way to wrap up hope, if you looked in the mirror today, right now, what would you say?
I can't look at the physical because I hate it, but inside, I have to think about what God thinks about me, and that's all that matters is what me and God think and what God thinks.
So
Not
what does
anybody
God
else
think?
thinks. Pardon me?
What does God think?
God thinks like I could do better because I fall short every day. And even though, I do the best that I can always do better, but I have to remember that it's a learning process. It's progress, not perfection. And the day I think I got it is when I'm screwed. I need to stay green. I need to keep growing, and my primary purpose is to help others. I went through a whole training thing to help these other women that don't have an opportunity to, don't want to do AA. Don't hate God, don't want to have anything to do with God. What do we do with those people? And so I went through, I'm actually a certified professional recovery coach so that I can find a way to help other people that doesn't have to be this easier, softer way, which I consider AA is.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's my purpose is, God, if you have a hard time with God, let's just go to God is good and God is love. Remember those two things? So if I replace the word in any of this with good or love, it all works.
It all works. Yep.
Love it.
Love it.
So instead of, if I could kind of summarize what you just said, instead of seeing hate, you see goodness and love.
Got to seek it. And that's the thing is seeking. They say, seek and you shall find. But, what are you seeking? We need to seek goodness and love. That's what we seek. And then God will show us that. But, and that's where that seventh, that the third step prayer is, is His will, not mine.
Right.
So
right.
we got to pray for His will, not mine. So when I'm praying to Him, I'm like, your will, God. And all I can do is go good and love.
Right.
Good and love. And then what can I do next? And I quit asking Him why.
That's
I
right.
ask Him how, what, where, when.
And that's
Love it.
awesome.
Not why.
Love it.
Because I may not know why.
Will you come back again?
Oh, you bet. Are you kidding? You guys haven't even heard a
let's
fraction. That's only a small fraction because I didn't even get into the hope and the positivity and the happy, joyous, and free part of it, because it really is.
I hear it in your voice.
It really is.
And I see it in your
Yeah.
walk.
Goodness and love.
Can I share one thing with you?
Yes. Go ahead. Share away.
At the heart of every deception lies a key principle. This is what I call the great deception, the belief that we have a better plan for our lives than God does. And there was this thing that was written in the 12 and 12, and it says these distinguished men, they were doing a survey to see what we had in common. And these distinguished men had the nerve to say that most of the alcoholics under investigation were still childish, emotionally sensitive, and grandiose. And I was like, oh, hell yeah.
Baby.
That's Mikey and I.
That's
what
me.
it is.
So remember, though, and I want to leave you with this, when waiting for prayers to be answered, it might be in the waiting that we get the answer.
Yep.
Yep.
I
Love you.
that. I love you
girl.
guys. Thank you for having
Bye,
me.
Glennie.
Thanks,
I'm
Lynda.
coming back.
Have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.